Africa is often considered as one of the poorest regions in the world, with most of its countries grappling with a range of socio-economic challenges. Despite the continent's abundant natural resources and potential for development, poverty and underdevelopment continue to afflict a significant portion of its population. The question of why Africa has become poor is one that has puzzled policymakers, scholars, and development practitioners for decades. This video seeks to provide an in-depth analysis of the factors that have contributed to Africa's poverty, with a focus on historical, political, economic, and social factors. Historical factors. Africa's history has played a significant role in shaping its current state of poverty. The continent's colonial past, for instance, left behind a legacy of underdevelopment and dependency. Most African countries were colonized by European powers in the 19th and 20th centuries, during which time they were exploited for their natural resources and forced to adopt foreign cultures and systems of governance. This exploitation left many African economies weak and unable to compete in the global market, with most of them relying heavily on the export of primary commodities. Moreover, the colonial powers imposed borders on the continent that did not correspond to the ethnic, linguistic, and cultural realities of the people living within them. This resulted in numerous conflicts, both between and within African countries, which have hindered economic growth and development. The effects of colonialism are still evident in many African countries today, with the majority of them struggling to overcome the legacy of underdevelopment and dependency. In addition to colonialism, the slave trade was another significant historical factor that contributed to Africa's poverty. Millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homes and transported across the Atlantic to work as slaves in the Americas. This disrupted traditional African societies and led to the loss of millions of lives and the destruction of local economies. The slave trade also reinforced existing power imbalances on the continent, with elites profiting from the sale of their fellow Africans to European traders. Political factors. Political instability has been a major contributor to Africa's poverty. Many African countries have experienced frequent coups, civil wars, and political unrest, which have disrupted economic activity and deterred foreign investment. The lack of political stability has also created an environment in which corruption and rent-seeking thrive, with elites using their positions of power to extract resources from the state rather than invest in development. Moreover, Africa's governance structures have been characterized by weak institutions, limited accountability, and a lack of transparency. This has created an environment in which state resources are mismanaged and misappropriated, resulting in limited public investment in key sectors such as health, education, and infrastructure. The absence of effective checks and balances has also allowed the abuse of power by those in positions of authority, further undermining the prospects for economic growth and development. Another political factor that has contributed to Africa's poverty is the external interference by foreign powers. Many African countries have been subject to neo-colonialism, whereby foreign powers exert undue influence over their affairs through economic, military, and political means. This has often resulted in the subversion of democracy, the imposition of unpopular policies, and the exploitation of natural resources by foreign companies. This has contributed to a situation in which African countries are often unable to control their own economic and political destinies, further entrenching poverty and underdevelopment. Economic factors. Economic factors have also played a significant role in Africa's poverty. The continent's economies have been heavily dependent on primary commodities, with most African countries relying on a few key exports such as oil, minerals, and agricultural products. This has left them vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices, with many African countries experiencing boom and bust cycles that have undermined economic stability. Moreover, Africa's economies have been characterized by low levels of industrialization and technological development, which has limited their ability to add value to their natural resources and diversify their economies. This has resulted in a situation in which most African countries are unable to compete in the global market, with limited opportunities for creating decent jobs and generating sustainable economic growth. Another economic factor that has contributed to Africa's poverty is the debt burden. Many African countries have high levels of external debt, which has limited their ability to invest in key sectors such as education, health, and infrastructure. The debt burden has also contributed to a situation in which African countries are often forced to implement austerity measures and prioritize debt repayment over development, further entrenching poverty and underdevelopment. Social factors. Social factors have also played a role in Africa's poverty. The continent has some of the highest levels of inequality in the world, with a small elite controlling a disproportionate share of resources and opportunities. This has created a situation in which the majority of the population is excluded from economic and social progress, with limited access to education, healthcare, and basic services. Moreover, Africa has some of the highest levels of population growth in the world, which has put significant pressure on resources and infrastructure. The rapid population growth has also made it difficult for African countries to provide basic services such as healthcare, education, and housing to all their citizens, further entrenching poverty and inequality. Conclusion. In conclusion, Africa's poverty is the result of a complex interplay of historical, political, economic, and social factors. The legacy of colonialism, political instability, weak governance structures, external interference, dependence on primary commodities, high levels of debt, inequality, and rapid population growth have all contributed to a situation in which most African countries are unable to realize their full potential. Addressing these underlying factors will require a comprehensive approach that involves political, economic, and social reforms. This will require a sustained commitment by African governments, international organizations, and the global community to create an enabling environment for sustainable economic growth and development.